So what I'm going to do, and I may even elect to move more swiftly than usual through the slides that I currently have because we're covering a lot of that ground. I'm sorry to get in your way. I'm going to stick very closely to my script, which gets me timed at 7 and like maybe 10 minutes. We're going to try for 7 minutes. No, sincerely, right? And see how we go. So wave me off at 7. At 10, bad things start happening. So this is a Jacquard loom. For those of you who can't see the image, it is a bunch of punch cards. It is a programmable loom. It's from the 1800s. Back in the day, it was pretty nifty, and if I had time, I'd talk a lot more about it. I'd also talk a lot more about the technology that I used when I started using computers, programming on a descendant of this Jacquard loom technology, and how this Jacquard loom technology increased in terms of computational power, storage, and speed to generate the first draft of the internet, which I had the privilege of participating in creating applications that got built on top of that. That turned out to be very formative after my extended break from technology, where I went on sort of a vision quest with a surfboard for a while. And in Act 2 of my career, made common cause with a lot of the people in this room to start thinking about managerial questions and stuff that we deal with in the wild. Okay? And recently, as increases in machine learning and AI has heated up again, we're moving away from the thought of the AI winter. There's been growing interest in the management sciences about the impact of machine learning, automated innovation, and the economics of artificial intelligence. And very recently, strategy scholars themselves are starting to weigh in. There have been some essays in the Harvard Business Review. There's a special issue in strategy science. And there's a book most recently called Prediction. Is it Prediction Machines, I think is the final galley title. Delightful book. Recommend all this stuff. Chat with me afterwards if you want to know about it. Right, on this topic, taking up the question of whether or not the formulation of a firm's strategy, the one thing that gets you like far, the thing that everyone wants you to raise your salary over, whether that very thing, which has been typically the purview of top management, is something that can be replaced by a machine. Have we really come this far? No. If you're a strategy scholar, obviously the answer is no, because you can't go into a board of directors and consult with them about their AI strategy if you really mean we're going to replace you with AI. That's not what they're asking you to do when they're asking you to consult for their AI strategy. They're asking you to educate them or whatever. It's just inconceivable to imagine that machines are going to be able to do this kind of thinking. So there's this objection in our literature, in our conversations in strategy, come down to two basic flavors. The first is that for some reason, machines are necessarily incapable of producing the kind of mental work or creative outputs that we take as definitive of strategy formulation. So there's some sort of aspect of human thinking, judgment, creativity, right? And this special parameter is what allows us to be sure that machines can't do this thing. So human creativity and judgment in this context are non-substitutable. There's another flavor of this. This is as you mentioned, the common flavor, which is a bit measured, which is okay. Machines, they might be able to do some kinds of strategy, maybe, but certainly not breakthrough strategy. I don't quite know what that is, but it's special because it generates breakout performance, right? But what's important here is that there are differences. The differences are interesting, and we could talk, again, I could talk about them at length, but where they converge is in the conclusion that real strategy, the kind that generates breakout performance, requires a sort of mental thinking, a little mental apparatus the machines are necessarily incapable of doing ever. This is the strategy as special snowflake hypothesis, right? This hypothesis is not uncommon. Right? It happens all the time. We always tend to think that the higher order task is the thing that we do, and it's special. There are lower order tasks. We know what those tasks are, the things that we don't do. And the lower order tasks, of course, are going to be done by machines. But it's inconceivable to imagine that these higher order tasks could be done because feelings. And this has not gone well. Right? People draw a line in the sand and they say, sure, machines can do this, but they can't do that, and then machines do that. Right? These are really interesting times. And the challenge in strategy for us is that conversations tend to devolve into areas that are typically outside of our pay grade, right? Into questions of impossibility or inevitability, right? And these are essentially fields against fields at high levels of value. I have some feelings, you have some feelings. We don't really understand this very well, but we have enough feelings to generate and enough priors to hope that we can talk about this stuff. Some of these questions that are sort of outside of our purview, which we may get to here, are, do we need fundamental breakthroughs in the algorithms that we have to generate sort of human strategies? Or are the algorithms enough? Or privately, because we spend our time embedded in these companies, do these algorithms, these breakthrough algorithms actually exist and no one is talking about them? That's an open question. Is the computational model of mind an appropriate format from which to begin to think about what human cognition and machine cognition can do or not do? This is incredibly contested territory in the cognitive sciences. This is not easy to come to. And the third is, perhaps there are different kinds of intelligences, and these can, or necessarily cannot, get to the end we see, strategy formulation, through different means than humans might. So, as I mentioned, what you end up with here, if you stick to this sort of trend in the conversation, is a bunch of competing fields about the future. And while that's super cool cocktail party conversation, that doesn't get me where I want to go to, which is a research program, somehow. What I'm interested in is getting to something that I can test. So in the paper that we're working on, we do two things. The first is attempt to upgrade the conversation beyond impossibility and inevitability. And importantly, for strategy scholars, maybe not for you so much, I'm not so interested in AI and ML, to be frank. Right? Strategy is my jam. Technology is not my jam. What I'm really interested in is using this as a wedge to probe strategy's foundations and to ask, again, what is strategy and what's a strategic question? How am I doing on time? 5 minutes?
It's okay, you can.
Yeah.
It's a good flow, you can.
You sure? All right. So I'll give you the map of the territory of the paper, some provocative conclusions, and then I'm going to get out of the way so we can brawl. So what we do in the paper is we take a very conservative construal of today's technology, no magical thinking required. So we look at what we know about today and what's in the wild today, and we make no assumptions about some sort of future breakthrough in algorithms, some sort of massive quantum compute piece. We then decompose the nature of strategic work and machine intelligence, and we sort of map these things on to one another. And this is, you can't see this. This is, I totally recommend watching Frank Chen's video at YouTube, Andreessen Horowitz, AI, What's Working, What's Not, because I've ripped off this graphic from him. Essentially what we're saying is, can we get to strategy formulation, the formulation of some kinds of corporate strategies using narrow AI, conservative construal of today's technology? Because super AI, we may talk about it speculatively, but we're not even in a position to know much about it because, sort of as you highlighted, we don't even have a coherent research program that gets us close to general AI yet. We have different notions of how we're going to go about doing it, but we have no convergence on the program itself. So as a result, to have this conversation, make it productive, this is where we have to focus. I've got 4 or 5 more slides. Thank you for your patience. So a common and quite reasonable argument why machines can't do strategy is that strategy and management are more than just number crunching. And here we would be in fantastic company because that is what Mix Master P has been telling us for a long time. Right? Strategy is decidedly not operational effectiveness. Because if it were about optimization and crunching numbers, it would be dark days for the field because this stuff is in fact in the machine wheelhouse. Right? So thankfully, this is not what we're talking about here. What I think we might be talking about here, which is closer to our understanding, my understanding of what strategy might be about, is a series of choices that Porter talks about, daring to be different, daring to be creative. These are essentially predictions about the world, untested hypotheses about the state of the world today, the resources we currently have, the bets about the future, and what we can do. And here, in our paper, we suggest that cast in machine learning terms, these are prediction and inference problems. These problems, as it turns out, we've been making, as you pointed out, thankfully, a fair amount of headway in. We'll talk about this in just a minute. But this is like the meat and potatoes. Again, absent implementation, And it's very important here, it's like a little asterisk, that like what we've done here is we've basically gotten rid of implementation and just talked about the hypothesis testing. Because if you take that and turn it up to 11, you get our strategy as theorist stuff. This is my colleague Todd Zenger and also with Teppo Feline talking about what strategy really is these predictions as full-blown corporate theories. This is managers or CEOs as like Miles Davises or Picassos of corporate formulation, and that there's this creative stuff that human beings can do that unfortunately machines cannot do and never will be able to do. So I'm going to make 3 statements from our paper and then 3 propagations. Although there's debate about whether optimization problems are actually strategy problems, problems of this type are going to be yielding increasingly to machines. I think this is the interesting one for me. Insofar as one can convert or alchemize a traditional strategy problem into a problem of prediction and inference, those problems machines will increasingly handle. And finally, it's unclear to me, and it's unclear in this paper, that analogical reasoning, which is the third reason that we can't do this stuff, represent either the complete view or the correct view for conceptual foundations for how you develop breakthrough strategies. Maybe I can just leave these up and let it be, right? Does that work?
Yeah, why not?
Okay.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, guys.